You know that expression, one man's trash is another man's treasure? Well, up next, I'm excited to introduce our second social entrepreneur, Scott Boylston, whose organization, Emergent Structures, helps communities convert waste into wealth and natural resources for the community. Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Scott Boylston, and I'm a professor of design for sustainability at Savannah College of Art and Design, and also the president of Emergent Structures. Emergent Structures is a nonprofit organization that leverages abundant and available materials to build sustainable, equitable, and resilient communities. I'm from Savannah. Savannah has amazing resources, beautiful resources that the city has historically built its economy on. If you take a look at some of these visuals, this is what Savannah is like. However, when I talk about resources for building community, I'm not talking about any resources that you see here. I'm talking about resources that are available in Savannah as well as in northern China and India and everywhere. And what I'm talking about is construction and demolition waste. There's so much construction and demolition waste every single year flowing through our cities and out into landfills. To give you a sense of what I mean by that, the Netherlands has almost a million tons of construction and demolition waste being landfilled every year. That's despite the Netherlands diverting 90% of their construction and demolition waste. So only with 10%, they're still producing 1 million tons of construction and demolition waste. Hong Kong, a city that's half the size of the Netherlands in terms of population, is producing almost 3 million tons of waste every single year from C&D. And the United States landfills a whopping 134 million tons of construction waste every single year. Our organization is looking at how every city, every community can turn that waste into wealth. If I only had a minute on the stage to tell you what we do, I would tell you this. We take things like this, and we turn them into things like this. We take things like this, and we turn them into things like this. Things like this are turned into things like this. And things like this are turned into things like this. And this is how we do it. We a lot of talk about TriSector Partnerships, engaging community at the grassroots level. We bring together people from engineering and construction, municipalities. We bring community leaders together. We bring wealthy populations together with poorer populations to volunteer to do some of this work. We pay carpenter apprentice programs and individuals who are learning a new trade to work side by side with community members. And it's in a collaborative, it's an iterative process. What we've decided to do in Savannah, it's 6 years old now, this endeavor, is to prototype this concept, to find out if indeed it could work in larger cities around the world. And through these processes, these cross-sector iterative processes, we found that perhaps there is a way to take these materials effectively and turn them into community wealth. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about we've developed a three-tier model, and this three-tier model is intended to ignite interest and in this kind of work across sectors. The first area is market transformation. We, in 2009, were invited into a redevelopment project in Savannah, 200 1943 homes that were built to house shipbuilders during the war effort, had become a blighted neighborhood, high drug, high crime, and they were looking to bulldoze it. I asked if we could actually try something different, and they were willing to give it a try. So what we did is, over the course of 4 years, worked with the construction companies, the city of Savannah, Mercy Housing, which is a large nonprofit that provides affordable housing. And we took materials from these buildings, and as you see in some of these pictures, created a new space directly on site within that redevelopment, so that these people who are living in some of the buildings that you just saw, when they come into the new community center or their new library, they're actually walking on materials that were a part of their history. So symbolically, these kinds of materials speak to the legacy of living in this space and the transformation that they've undergone. Another part of this, however, is making sure that the construction industry is a willing partner. How do we make it meaningful to an industry that's very complex, that has a lot of competition between various different businesses? Redevelopment is a complex process. I want to show you this picture. Brian Quigley is on the left there. He's a north-south contractor, a general contractor. This was his idea. We stimulated ideas. We're not doing everything. We're facilitating conversations. Everybody knows you can't take an 8-foot-long stud and put it into a new building as a stud. Everybody knows that. But that's where the innovation ends, is saying, well, we can't do that. Instead, what Brian started thinking about is if we take an 8-foot stud and cut it down into 18-inch sections, and then work with a truss manufacturer to incorporate those pieces into new trusses, we might be able to start doing some innovation within this on-site reuse. A gentleman on the right was I think this is a perfect individual we're aiming a lot of our work at. The electrical general contractor, when we were walking out to the site, Brian Quigley and myself were telling him about what we had done, and he was about as skeptical as anybody could be. He said, that's ridiculous, it's not going to work, or it's too symbolic, you can't do a lot of things. He took one look up at what was about 3,000 of these pieces in these new trusses, and he quite literally changed his mind on the spot. He saw his eyes open, he said, wow, if you can do that, well, you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this. So what we're trying to do is demonstrate these new ideas in action so that people can actually see a new future in front of them. Other things that we do is work directly with the community. In this case, we're using the studs to teach that community to build their own rainwater catchment stands, and we ran workshops with these waste materials. This entire model is focused on trying to figure out how to create more efficiencies in the system. So what you see here is a 3D model that we generated so that we could actually use these buildings as a form of a shopping cart. And we think that if we're in the early stages of developing an ERP that's specific to construction and demolition waste that we think could transform businesses at a high level. So identifying the materials, and then once again looking at them as if they were something in a shopping cart. The second level is how we introduce more partnerships. We've worked with public schools, we've worked with the Habitat for Humanity, and we're developing programs so that local craftsmen can build furniture from these materials. We've also developed public school lesson plans to generate an interest and innovation within children based upon this idea that these materials can be something other than what we see them as they are right now. And then the habitat, you can see I'm wearing a bow tie here. Well, this bow tie was once a stud. It's a wooden stud, 1943. This piece is from a piece of wood in 1943, developing innovative ways for people to go, wow, if that's possible, then ... and let them fill in the gaps and generate more creativity at the local level. So the final one, and this is also kind of an example of cultural paradigm shift, because if someone sees a bow tie and says, I didn't know you could make that out of wood, we want people thinking very differently. Another thing that we're doing is we're working with the donor class, and we're trying to create a more meaningful form of philanthropy. We call it materialanthropy because it's not donating money, it's donating materials, but it's much deeper than something that you'd find at Habitat Restore, because what we do, this is the Caldwells in Savannah, we engage them in the projects that are created from the material waste streams that are coming from their individual homes. This is a map, it's geographically rendered. The bigger the red dot is, the more materials that went into the project. And for every large-scale project, they are invited to the ribbon cutting, whether it be a public school or a community center that has a new shed or a new pergola or something like that, and they become invested in the process. This would be one example of how we worked with 2 material anthropists on top, and the city of Savannah, which is the third image, and then IKEA. We were working with a number of international organizations to fund some of these projects in meaningful ways. And what you see on the right-hand side is a plaque that tells a story of the materials. So anybody who goes onto that pergola knows where the flooring came from. They have a sense of the history of the materials. So very quickly, this is our three-tier model. I gave you some examples of each of the things that we're doing in there. We have prototyped many different kinds of projects within each of these areas, and we think that we can provide this as a consulting tool to municipalities where they can pick their own menu items off of this to provide flexibility. 230,000 public housing units in the United States alone coming down. This is a HUD number in the next 5 years. I'm sorry, next 10 years. It's a lot of material. We know we can't save it all. We know that. But there has to be a better way, a more efficient way, a way that generates new value and new connectivity in communities and between businesses. This is our philosophy is built on Wendell Berry's idea of solving for pattern. Too often humans create solutions that ripple negatively throughout the system. We're very conscious about exploring how solutions ripple positively, generate more positive outcomes just for actually creating that. Very quickly at the end here, we're inspired by the SDGs. And we have been mapping. This is not a checklist, but this is very much helpful for us. We know that a lot of our work fits into number 11. We also know that a lot of our work fits into some of the other categories. But more importantly for us is the outer ring, because the work that we do are for people who are creating food justice programs. They're creating educational programs for at-risk youth. And we know that these materials can become a resource to build community. And this is our philosophy. It's not a board, it's a springboard for sustainable change. Thank you.